There is said to be a witch named Mary Stickholm in Lafayette, Ohio. She was killed in a witch trial from what I know. She haunts the graveyard in a little town. There are few tombstones, and there's a hill below with more stones. They are so old, you can barely even read them. But a friend of my father's used to go out there and party. They would try to see her. When they killed her, they cut her head off and buried it in another grave. Said to be at midnight she goes looking for her head. Well, they were out there partying that night, and my dad's friend was walking down the hill when he got hit with an apple. Some girl that was with them threw it at him, and he woke up the next morning next to the grave with his last name on it. He totally freaked, because this is a small town, and everyone knew everyone, and no one had his last name. He couldn't even find any info about the grave, but he is still freaked. Also, they've got spooked out there and couldn't start their bikes, but could start them after they got down the hill. Said strange lights are up there. We have a video of the graveyard with a man telling the tale, and it's pretty spooky. Plus, he lived with ghosts in his house. Hope everyone likes email. If you know about this graveyard or you want to chat, I'll never forget it. I had an experience a few years ago that I'll never forget. I stayed in a 3-level house in an older section of the city. This section is a regal type of area, but the houses date back to the beginnings. The house had 2 living rooms, a small kitchen, big veranda in front of the house, and a half bathroom on main level. The second floor had 2 connected bedrooms, and a master bedroom with another veranda, which ended up on top of a veranda on main floor. There was a full bathroom on this floor also, with, get this, a hanging type of veranda that led off from the bathroom. Nobody used this veranda, which went to the back of the home. On the second floor, there was a small spiral staircase that led to the 3rd floor. There were 2 bedrooms here. This is where I stayed. It was a hippie type of setting in that there was a bunch of friends living together. Mind you, this happened in the early 80s. About the 3rd night of my being in my new surroundings, I began to feel quite depressed to the point that I felt suicidal, and I didn't know why. When comparing stories later with another person that I lived there with, I found out that I was the only one to experience suicidal thoughts. Along with those dark thoughts, I had another strange thought go through my head right then. There's a girl in here right now. I wonder what I was doing thinking stupid like that. You see, I left this house before anyone else, and I was the last person to find out that a strange girl, and she was also malicious, was being seen by the ones who weren't smart like me to move out earlier. I basically kept to myself while I was living there, and I was given my space. Life in that house got spookier. One night, as I was washing my hair in the sink, on the 2nd floor, and the doorknob behind me, which led to the veranda, began to jiggle and make it sound like someone was playing with the doorknob. Of course I was spooked. I would stop and look at the doorknob, with soap running down my face, and wonder what was going on. I mustered enough courage to open the door to see who was in the veranda. Nobody. So I thought I must be imagining things, and then proceeded to finish my hair. The doorknob jiggled again. I would stop washing my hair, look at the doorknob, and the jiggling would stop. I tried the more to hurry up with my hair. Every time I started to wash my hair, the jiggling would continue until I looked at the doorknob. I was quite scared. I only got my hair done that night because I got a friend to talk to me while I did my hair. In the meantime, different people were having their own experiences. On one of the rare occasions when there were hardly anybody in the home, one of my friends was about to ascend to the 2nd floor when a pillow came rolling down the stairs. She began to question whoever was around if they were the prankster. At the time, I was on the 3rd floor reading a book, and she questioned me also. We didn't say much more to each other about the incident, but I know people living in the house were beginning to talk and compare their experiences. A bad habit of mine at one time was to stay up to watch TV and drink coffee all night. Just once I tried to do this in the house. I found I couldn't do this, because when I did attempt to enjoy my favorite pastime, I felt such a feeling that someone was watching me, and I knew that I was the only one up. I also felt too very scared that I just didn't dare to stay up any longer. I quickly trashed that idea. I would find out later from my other friends who tried to stay up alone that they would experience someone calling their name in a whispering voice. I'm really glad that didn't happen to me. Finally, I couldn't stay there anymore because I was so depressed. I felt like everybody was friends but me. I asked my mom if I could come back and live at home with her. I was glad when she said yes. I didn't bother to let anybody know my plans to leave. I just thought I would do my friends a favor before I left, and that there was to leave the house spotless and clean. So on one particular day, when no one was around, I began to clean. I even made myself a pot of coffee. I got my clothes together. Meanwhile, I was feeling more and more jumpy. I was even scared to leave my packed clothes on the 3rd floor and got them when I left. I was that jumpy, and I still didn't think the reasons were that the house was haunted. So I took my clothes and propped open the front door with them. I managed to finish cleaning one living room when suddenly an overpowering fear overtook me, so that I dropped everything that I was doing and literally ran out the front door, grabbing my clothes as I left. I got outside and took a long look at the house and walked away. I'll also never forget the feeling of relief and peace I felt as I got further and further away from the house. I was never too great on talking terms with some of the people there, because I was quite depressing to be around when I was living there. One night I was visiting one of the old friends there, when all of a sudden the sound of many rushing feet came through the door. Here was the good old gang. They had fled that house in fear, because they were beginning to see the spirit of the girl there, beginning to manifest itself exactly about the same time I left there. I'll never forget that. I have had no choice but to believe in the other side from as early as I can remember. My first and only visual confrontation with the spirit occurred when I was between 2 and 3 years old. My mother had put me in a crib in her room for a nap while she went downstairs and continued her housework. No one else was in the house but her and I. I remember waking from my nap and holding onto the rails of the crib while yelling, "Come get me, Mom." The house was very large, and I could hear her walking about downstairs. I felt very impatient about getting out of the crib, and remember sizing up the railings to decide whether or not to climb out. I remember the yell, "Ma, come get me," and out of the corner of my eye I saw something glide off my mother's bed and materialize into a gray shape. It precisely glided forward and then towards me and extended its arms out to me. I backed away from the rails and uttered, "No, not you." I didn't know anything about spirits, but I knew that witnessing this was shocking. The figure immediately retracted to exactly where it had come from, including flattening back out on my mother's bed. In a matter of seconds, my mother appeared in the doorway. I told her that something else had tried to lift me out. She looked frightened for a moment and then told me that I was dreaming. But all of this had occurred while I was awake and waiting for her. I didn't understand, then, why she hadn't given me more credence to such an unusual event. My grandmother had passed away when I was age 2, I later learned. I believe that her spirit had tried to show me kindness. However, I never felt comfortable alone in an empty room of that house. In the next 10 years, my own mother passed away. My brother, father, and I all experienced strange occurrences of one kind or another. My mother told me years later, when I was in my late 20s, that he too believed that the house was haunted, and it was only when he gave away my grandmother's bedroom set and her giant framed photographs that the unusual going-ons had ended. I'm not sure that they have ended. I haven't lived in the house for 28 years, but I often wonder. I've always thought about ghosts, but it all started when I moved to Litchfield, Minnesota. We remodeled an old farmhouse that had 5 fires in it. One day I was cooking in the kitchen, and all of a sudden the towel caught on fire. It was terrible. That wasn't even the worst of it. One night I came home from work, and my brothers wouldn't go to bed. So then I sent them upstairs. All of a sudden there was a pounding on the walls upstairs. I went upstairs and outside to check, and at that time, my brothers were downstairs crying. So I called my boyfriend first, and then my mom, who was at work too. I was crying. So she came home instantly and we prayed. That hasn't happened since. Then I was taking a shower one morning, and on the mirror was dye. I wasn't too afraid because I thought it was my siblings, but no one was home. So then I got afraid. Another incident is this little TV we have doesn't stay on. I'm convinced that I have ghosts and it really scares me. Lately I moved to Hutchinson, and I experienced something else that I found unexplainable. One night I was just watching TV, and the fire alarms in my apartment went off. They aren't battery operated either. Freaky, huh? Well, these are my stories. I have lived with ghosts ever since I can remember. The house I lived in while I was growing up is haunted by a blonde child. The only way you can see this ghost is out of the corner of your eye. You never can see him looking straight ahead. He runs up and down the hall, which ends into the kitchen. You can see the hallway and kitchen entrance from the living room, and for years, I would see him run by. But I always thought it was my little brothers, who were the same height and blonde. Until one night, my parents were gone, and my 4 brothers and I were sitting in the living room with the lights off watching TV, and I saw him run from the kitchen and down the hall. I sat there for a minute wondering what my little brothers were into. Then I realized everyone that was in the house was in the living room with me. I always knew the house was haunted, but I never thought I had ever seen the spirit until that night. Then I realized I'd been seeing it for years. I told my brothers about it, and we all decided to call the spirit Sam, because we didn't know if it was a girl or boy, and Sam seemed appropriate. It seemed to be attached to just me, because I was the only one who could see it. And my room was the region of its source somehow. My room was always the coldest room in the house, no matter what time of year. I grew up in Oklahoma, and the summers out there aren't very nice, but my room was always cold. Cold to where I would need a comforter and blankets every night. Some nights Sam, I hope that is who it was, would shake my bed and wake me up in a fright, leaving me there wondering if the bed was really still moving. Or was it just my heart pounding? I was too scared to move or open my eyes to see. Some nights he would turn my radio, waking me up, and wonder if my little brothers were being brats again, only to find them sound asleep in their room. There was one night that I was not quite asleep yet. I was laying on my back with one of my arms resting up on my forehead, when I felt this cold breeze on my arm, and then something just threw my arm off of my forehead and onto my chest, and then the radio came on. It was so fast I didn't know what had happened until I thought about it. Soon after I moved out and in with my sister, when I was 16. My parents moved out a couple of years later, but they still own the home. When I was 24, I'd gotten a divorce from my first husband and moved back into the house with my 2 children. I made the room that used to be mine into a toy room. I really didn't need them to sleep in there. Then I made my second husband and he moved in with us. The next thing I know, Mark, my second and present husband, is asking me if anyone has ever died in this house. I told him that I didn't really know and asked him why. He told me that toy room light keeps flickering on and off. It freaked him out really bad. I explained to him that there was a spirit in the house, and we've always called him Sam. And if Sam freaked him out too bad, to tell him to just go to bed. Then Mark was able to see him, only out of the corner of his eye, running up and down the hallway. It would freak him out pretty bad, and he hated when it would happen while I was at home. But soon he got used to telling Sam to go to bed, when he would say that the happenings would stop for a night or 2, and then start up again. We lived there for 2 years and then moved out. It is empty right now, until my parents sell it. For some reason, every time they try to sell it, something happens, and it never sells. Well, there's the start of my little adventures. I have more because that is one of my hobbies. Ghost hunting is what my sisters and I call it. I will have to submit the story about one that followed me home one night, but that will come later. Hope you enjoyed. My great aunt Mary and I had 3 sons: Murphy, Peter, and Victor. Peter was the oldest, and when he was in his early 30s, he offed himself in her house. He was staying with her while going through a divorce, and he was very depressed. One day while my aunt was at work, he took all the pills in her medicine cabinet, and there was a lot. Marion had a heart condition, and drank most of the bottle of vodka. My poor aunt found out he was dead on the floor in her den when she came home that evening. Then within a few months, Murphy, who was in his late 20s, was diagnosed with some rare form of cancer and died of it within 6 months. My grandfather died, and grandmother went to live with Mary and her sister. A few months later, my grandmother died of a stroke on Marion's living room couch. Poor Aunt Marion. You'd think all that shocking grief would have finished her off, what with her already having heart problems. All these deaths happened in the span of about a year. The next Valentine's Day rolled around, and when Marion came home from work, her housekeeper told her she couldn't get the hearts of the carpet in the den. She didn't understand what the lady was talking about, so she went into the den to have a look. There were hearts in a pattern like footsteps, leading from the doorway of the room to the place where Peter was found. In that space was a great big heart, a couple of feet wide. It was like someone had brushed the nap of the carpet in the opposite direction to draw the heart shapes into the carpet. The housekeeper told my aunt she had vacuumed over it numerous times and done everything she could think of to get rid of them, but they wouldn't go away. Marion got down on her hands and knees and tried to brush the hearts away with her hands, but they just wouldn't go. They finally called the University of Maryland, who promptly came out and investigated. They confirmed it as an actual psychokinetic phenomenon. As far as I know, the hearts are still there today. Marion thought it was a message from Peter, a valentine to say he loved her, and that he was sorry that he hurt himself, and for doing it in her house. My mother thinks it was her grandmother, because she was so sweet, and that's just the sort of thing she would do. Send a valentine to her sister. Other relatives thought it might be Murphy for some reason, but I think it was Peter, because the footsteps led to the big heart that was in the place where they found him. The whole thing clearly says Peter to me. Spooky, huh? Definitely. But also kinda neat, because to me, it's more proof that there's life after death.
It all happened about 13 years ago. I was about 14 years old, and I will always remember that late evening. A bit of context first. We are 8 siblings, 4 girls, 4 boys, raised only by Mom. Dad walked out on us a few years prior to the event I am about to tell. We grew up quite modest. Mom was the only breadwinner. We didn't have a lot, and we were living in a rental that was just a bathroom, a small hallway, a living room that doubled as a bedroom for the girls and Mom, and a kitchen that also doubled as a bedroom for the boys. Anyway, we were a content Christian family. It was the 31st of October, and we were only 7 at home. My oldest sister was out and Mom was at work. Me being the second one, I was in charge. It was about 7 p.m. and we were all in the living room minding our business. Some of us were playing with some toys, I was painting, a few were watching TV, and it was quite peaceful, just waiting for Mom to come home. Suddenly, my younger brother said, "Hey guys, do you hear that?" We turned the TV volume down and listened. From across the hallway that were connecting the 2 main rooms, we could all clearly hear a repetitive, high-pitched banging. It was just as like someone was repeatedly hitting a spoon on a cup. We all stood frozen. It went on for a few minutes and then we stopped. All bundled up together, we slowly crept our way to the kitchen. On the table, there were some stuff like bread, butter, and a jar with a spoon in it. We just ate and we didn't put stuff away. We got close and tried to mix the jam with the spoon, and surely enough, it was the same sound. At this point, we didn't know what was the deal and we were really creeped out. The sound we heard couldn't have been produced by something like the wind or exterior forces. It was very deliberate, and it went on for a few minutes, so not just a spoon falling off or something like that. We put things away and we went back to the living room. That is when the horror really started. I kid you not, around the whole house there was unexplainable bangings. We could hear footsteps in the hallway, above us from the attic, around us from the walls. We all started crying and got in bed, all bundled up, praying. It all went like this for a few minutes, and suddenly we heard the house door open. It was Mom. She had just come back from work, and it all stopped. Needless to say, we all jumped on her, hugging her and crying. We told her what happened, and she was shocked. We never had an experience like that, and when we get together, we sometimes talk about it. It was one of the most scary things that ever happened to us. We all heard the same things. We didn't see anything, but the sounds were real. We think it might have been something like a demonic attack that wanted to create fear in us in one of the darkest nights of the year. Did any of you ever experience something like this? Dyer Street in El Paso has a history of violence, drugs, sex, and death. Ask anyone in El Paso about Dyer, and I guarantee they have a story about the Devil's Triangle or the Econo Lodge. So it makes sense that the store I work at is most likely haunted. I work at Burlington, but it wasn't always a Burlington. It used to be a big Kmart till they closed it down in 2017 and opened up a strip mall there. All the people that have been there since it opened in 2022 have stories of stuff falling over and footsteps being heard. But I chalked it up to the building settling or something being off balance and falling. It wasn't until last week when I started to think otherwise. So I'm closing on Black Friday, which for Burlington isn't a big deal because we don't have any sales. I mean, come on, it's already a discount store. Regardless of that info though, the store was still packed to the gills with people doing their early Christmas shopping. It's a little past 8 p.m., and I'm helping a family take one of those little vehicles that kids can ride around to their truck. When I walk back in the store, I get a call on the radio that one of the closed-off fitting rooms has been opened. Now, that thing is locked up good, so I'm thinking some kids must have been yanking the doorknob or pushing down on it and broke it. When I go to check it out, the doorknob is fine and no one is inside. I lock it back up and go back to helping out up front. About 20 minutes later, I hear something fall behind me. I look back and see a Santa Claus lawn statue had fallen over. I didn't think anything of it when I picked it up. When I set it back in place, a stuffed snowman which was sitting on the top shelf fell in front of me and set off the touchlights we had on the jewelry. I stepped back to see if anyone had bumped into the shelves, but it was just me right there. I was a little freaked out at this point and took a couple steps away from that shelf. That's when the lights on the jewelry started flashing on. Now, these lights don't turn on unless you tap the boxes the jewelry is in. They blink a few times at random, then stop completely. Before I can process what I'm seeing, the doors behind me, which are automatic doors, start to open and close without anyone walking by them. They open and close 3 times before it all stops. No more blinking lights, doors are acting normally, and nothing is falling over anymore. I tell my supervisor about it when she walks by and she says, "Oh, must be the Kmart ghost again," and walked away with a light giggle. Nothing else happened the rest of the night, but every night I've worked since, something has fallen over without anyone around, and my other coworkers have said they've heard noises in the closed-off fitting rooms.
Merry Christmas, my subscribers. Or is it? Not yet. It's early December, guys. I appreciate your subscribership, and if you want to support the channel for all these long videos we do them weekly, we do a lot of them, and if that's what you like, and you like to subscribe, and you like to support the cause, then I'd really appreciate Appreciate your subscriberships, your likes, your comments, and everything else, guys. Thank you for listening to the end of this very video. I'd like to see a comment, because I like talking to you guys. If you're new, why not just comment below? Love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video.